Okay, so I'm going to try to go through these relatively quick, give you some feedback on what I noticed. So we're going to start with the landscapes. We're going to skip exercise 1 because pretty much you only got one of two grades. You either got 100, which means you turned it in, or a 0, which means you didn't. So we can, if you want to just make that one better on your own time, that's fine. But I mean, if you turned it in, there's really not a way you can make a better grade than that. So I'll just give you feedback individually if you're just wanting to improve that for your own portfolio. So let's look in here. So this is our landscape, and so this one, the only thing I really noticed on this one is like some of the areas where we can noticeably see the blob brush. So maybe playing around a little bit with how it gets a little blobby right in there and right in here. You can tell that it was made with a brush that was the same diameter all over, and some of those areas here. So you could tighten that up just a little bit on that one. I actually really like this one, and overall that was my biggest note on it. Bethany, this one, excuse me. I think that and this one was another one that was actually really good. The only thing I think we could do is you probably could have taken a little bit of time to, rather than just flip this piece down under here and kind of, I'm not 100% sure that's how you did it, but it kind of looks like you flipped it and maybe altered it a little bit. But you could have like made this a little bit more wavy or like inexact. So what it feels like is just another object with these lines on top of it, which I think is what it is. So I think just making this shape seem like a reflection, even though it isn't. The other thing is I'm not 100% sure that reflection is accurate to how it would bounce off that. Sorry, I'm thinking here. Because it kind of depends on the angle in which we're looking at the water. But based off of this angle, I feel like it would be a slightly different shape than this. So you probably want to get some reference of how reflections work. But the biggest thing, I noticed that's not lining up with the bottom too. So very small things on that one, but overall pretty good. Carmen, landscape. This one turned out really good, specifically a lot of what you got going on in the trees here. And like this, like just that tree looks really nice. It's a little dark, and I know that like the argument may be it's supposed to be dark, it's nighttime. I feel like it's dark in that way that I'm having trouble seeing it as the audience, and so I think you need to make some areas like sort of pop out a little bit more. So instead of being overall dark, it needs just a touch more contrast, and sort of this banding around the light is very noticeable. This like perfect rings that go around it, and so even though like if you blur your eyes, that looks really good. I think we could probably do something to make that just a little less of these solid circles that are just hanging there, even if it just kind of messy them up a little bit. Having said that, though, overall this one was really good. Cheyenne, actually almost all of these were really good. So Cheyenne, this one I think has a lot of really nice detail going on up here in this cloud, and you're starting to get it in some of these areas here, but then it kind of falls apart and gets really simple, like in these larger areas. This large green area, the water doesn't have very much going on in it. These two planes don't have very much going on in it. I can kind of understand what's happening here. Like I understand some of these forms, but I get a little confused about what's happening all up in here. So is this like some ice caps that are or some icy like areas that are melting, and is this a shadow, and if so, why is it the only one? So I guess there was just a little bit of confusion of what's going on in here, and then these areas I think could use just a little bit more attention to sort of pop those up and make them a little bit more as rich as some of this other stuff going on in here. Daniel. Okay. Let's look at the two here. So I kind of like the foggy one. I think the biggest comment on this one was that I think you still use strokes. So if I'm not mistaken, go back and look at the exercise. This was exercise 2, landscapes. Yeah, you're only supposed to use filled shapes, and so you have some strokes in here. I wasn't 100% sure that those weren't shapes that made those lines, but I was relatively sure. So even if they are shapes that made those lines, it's kind of like that area and this set of mountains just kind of pop out because they have this like stroked outline, where everything else feels like kind of this softer, like solid shape. I actually really like the foggy one, so I think that was a really neat experiment. So I think it would be neat to try to see what you can do without getting those lines in there on the shapes. And then the last thing is, I think you could probably work a little bit with the composition. Because we got all of this area down in here that isn't adding a whole lot, and kind of the same up here. I mean, wonder what if you just chopped it into this sort of rectangle here, like just to improve the composition of how we're looking at this. Maybe even trim off a little bit on each side here, just to get a little bit of a tighter composition on how you want to frame this, because there's a lot of things done in here that we're just really not getting much information about. Overall, I think it's a really neat style, but that's my bigger note on that one. Okay, Dustin. Actually, I think this one turned out really neat. I know a couple of my comments kind of are a little bit about whatever you're using. Here, let me open up the Illustrator file so we can look at that more accurately and figure out what you're doing with it. Okay. Well, and here it's not as bad. So we were getting a lot of this like really fluffy feel around the trees, and so this, like in here, this looks really good. I think you had a really lower quality export, and so I think it needed a little bit of work on that to bring the export up to the same speed. The thing that kind of got me is I got a little confused in depth. So first, let's take that export issue. So export, when we export it out as a JPEG, hit save. Save. You just want to make sure you're set this to 300. I think before it was probably set to 72. So if I hit OK, I'm actually going to get probably a pretty decent version of that. So that's looking much better. So the things I noticed in the Illustrator file, though, is I like the method that you used. I think that it needs a little bit of playing with it to figure out the depth of it. So I think what you have is as we go further into the background, so I think that this is the part that's the furthest into the background, right? It's getting hazy, and so like that's why we got this clearer point here, and there's like haze down in here. And then these are really crisp and like colorful, so it's almost like we lose saturation as we go back into the background. But I'm not really seeing, like, it kind of confuses me in the depth. So this looks like it's kind of popping forward in front of this one. And so I think what you need is something to kind of divide some of these areas and really break this. So I guess the reason that is because it really only feels like these two mountains have haze on them. This area in front here doesn't feel very foggy at all. So I mean, I think even if you just used like, let's do the blob brush, make it really big. So even if we did a little bit of something like this, set that to sort of this whitish gray color, played with the transparency a little bit, even doing a little bit of that, may have helped, you know, just kind of getting this like haze in the foreground. I think that would just kind of communicate that. The thing for me is like these are just so rich, and like because they're darker, they usually feel like they recede. So I think that you just need to bring that haze forward, or you need to start kind of giving us an indication of where the shadow in between these areas are. So That's a very sloppy example, but you get the idea. I think that would help a lot. And I think that if it's that hazy, I'm not sure the sky would quite be that blue. So I guess the foreground looks like it's a sunny day. The background looks like it's a hazy morning. Does that make sense? And so just playing around with that a little bit. Overall, though, it actually came out pretty good. So Devon, I like it. So let's look at the ones that's not this, because I think that's again too low of a resolution. So I think you intentionally tried to get some of that. I mean, I know you intentionally tried to get the pixely feel in here. I think that the thing that I read is that it's almost like there's 3 different styles in here. This has like that blocky dark outline. Mario doesn't. And then down in here we have a little bit of a cleaner line, so it feels like it's a different resolution. And some of the same here with this. Like this has a little bit of a cleaner line, implying that it's a different, like these are just sharper lines. And then, but the biggest reason, like that, the biggest thing I think to tweak on this is like this piece here just really isn't popping out enough, and so I'd have to look at the. Let me look it up. Super Mario Brothers. Here's the image. And so if we bring this over and look at it, like I think what it is there's a little bit of a darker outline and a light line across the top, but even like some dark outlines around there. That's really just making those blocks sort of pop out. And this one, like it just needs a little bit more definition around it to kind of clean that up. Having said that, I mean, you know that this one doesn't need a whole lot. It just needs a little bit of cleanup to be thinking about that. And I really think the biggest thing is if we could just make these pop out a little bit more, that would help. So let's go ahead and minimize that. Grady. Sorry. Give me 1 second here. I'm trying to. It's organizing you all by your. Oh, there you are. By your last name, so it got me a little confused based off of the grading. Okay, so I actually think this one's looking really good. Excuse me. The thing I think I would, if you were going to work on anything, I think you could consider sort of playing with this highlight a little bit more to get a little bit more detail in here. And so you got a whole lot of really nice like transitions, and I'm not 100% sure how you've done these, if you've done it with a gradient mesh or gradient mesh, the gradient tool, or some sort of blend. I'm guessing this is probably the gradient mesh, but then you have these like very circular lines that kind of come out from there, and they just feel a little simple, so they could clean those up a little bit more. Not even clean those up, just kind of keep that feeling like a ripple, not like a plastic surface that it's in. So I think it needs a little bit more distortion in this, and maybe some more indication of the water out here. Overall, this looks really nice though. So Jean-Luc. Okay, so this one was a hard one for me to see at first because of the format. So let's do this. Let's go File, Export, JPEG. We're going to use the artboard. Did that put it in the same folder? Yep. And so that'll give us a little bit better of a thing that we can understand. A big part of this one, I think, is just sort of figuring out how to focus in on what it is you're wanting to show. I think all of the stuff that's within this like dugout area looks nice. Um, I don't necessarily know if this is like, I don't know what's happening in all this blue area. Does it make sense? I don't know if this line continues and goes down here. Like, are we looking up into? Is this like a cave that we're digging through, and this is the end of the cave with all these little tunnels in it? Like it was just kind of confusing to me about what's going on in here, and it just feels like you have this ramp, but it feels like a little unfinished. Like you kind of just stopped at that point and didn't really address what's going on out and through here. So even if it's just like a couple of indicating lines to kind of give, or indicating shapes to give us an idea of what's going on in the volume of this blue area. I actually think a lot of this stuff in here is looking kind of neat. It feels like a maze. It also kind of reminds me of a lot of like ancient archaeological digs and stuff like that. So it's got a really neat style. I just think you could probably pull that together to explain what's going on in the blue area a little bit more. Jonah. Okay, let's kick this one out as a JPEG too, just so I can see the higher quality. And so, I don't know if that did it with the artboard. Give me 1 second here, try that again. There we go. And so, this is looking pretty good. I think you could... So, I get a little confused about the depth. I think that this piece is in the foreground. This is the piece that's closest to me. And then this piece is next, and this piece is in the background. And there may be a chance that this is the piece that is actually closest to us. And so I think it needs a little bit of something in here in these dividing areas to clear that up. And it may just be just a dark line here to kind of separate that out. And so we can see like that's sort of an outline of, and this shape is in front, and like really what's going on in here, like just figuring out a little bit more information to kind of sort of clarify that a little bit is all I'm really looking for on that one. Mars. I like that your place has you in it already, and I think that's kind of neat. I like this one. It's a lot of interesting style in this. I think my biggest note is that, let's actually look at the vector. I don't want to give you notes on things that may actually just be in the conversion of the file, but okay. Yeah. So some of it is just a little bit of cleanup. So like the hair has a little bit of like those sharp points on it that we can kind of tell, like like that's very easy to tell that the blob brush made that, and that these are kind of like areas that are chopped out of it with, it's like it's this entire piece is the same diameter, and so we can, I think, just a little bit of cleanup on that. I actually really like kind of the messiness of some of these lines here. And so it feels very messy and scratchy, and I like that, and I like the cat. I think some of the form and this could be cleaned up a little bit, the legs and the and then we get to these stripes here, and again I can feel those shapes that were used to make this. Like it's very even, so I think you can kind of break that up just a little bit. With the leg, like most of the leg and the arm, I think you could clean those up by just using the smooth and just clean that just a little bit and just get a little bit of a nicer maybe the last one maybe was a bad idea. There we go. And just do a little bit more tweaking on that to kind of get a shape that you're happy with. But again, I like that you put yourself in it. So yeah, there's a couple areas like in the lines here on the legs that just feel a little get kind of a blue outline around the pants, and that's, you don't really see that anywhere else. And so maybe just play around with how the shadow would cast to show the outline of that instead of actually having a dark line around it. Mary. Okay. Yeah, I think that I think we already talked about this one a little bit. I like what you have going on in the depth here. This is feeling really good. But then we get kind of this blur here, which I imagine is like a depth of field. And then I'm not really sure, because that depth of field feels like that's far away, this thing gets a little confusing in terms of depth because it feels very sharp. And some of that sharpness may be coming from these rings of light cast around it. But like whatever's going on in that mountain, like if it's far away, like I start seeing like these really crisp lines here. And so that kind of throws me off on the depth of field. And I also just kind of get a little confused of what this is. It feels like a mountaintop with a hole dug out in it and some light coming at it. And if that's what's going on, that's cool, but I can't really tell. So I get the feeling that these rings that are cast outward, that may be the that lens flare tool or whatever it is that that Illustrator has. Maybe play around with that and see if you can get that to sort of balance out a little bit more. Again, let me look at the Illustrator file and not just give you feedback based off of something in the conversion. So yeah, again, those are really sharp, so it's like that confusion between the depth of field and that. And so I'm also noticing I'm getting a little bit of pixelation in here, and so my guess is that the reason for that is you probably did some sort of effect on it, on Sand Hill. Yeah, you can see that if we zoom in here, maybe not. Maybe it's actually just the level I was zoomed in at. Yeah, so that's not bad. I mean, we're getting pixelation once we get in there. I believe it's rasterizing parts of it to do whatever that effect is, but I think it's kind of doing it on the fly, so you're probably alright. Yeah, but overall that's the biggest thing, is just sort of figuring out why that's so crisp and maybe softening that up and just kind of defining that mountain. I would think that that mountain, like as blurry as that is, the mountain would be even blurrier. So again, the other option may be to actually take some of the blur out of the foreground. Okay, let me open up your Illustrator file too. Okay. So, I think this one's a pretty good start. I think I'd just like to see a little bit more refinement on some of the forms, like something even like, instead of this being completely black, make it like something like that is going to kind of push it back and give us a little bit more depth, right? And so or maybe that's pulling it forward a little bit. So you may play around with that a little bit, maybe make these a little bit more on the gray scale. Let's see if I can. So that's not a good one, but you get the idea that you can kind of play around with these colors a little bit, and just by doing that, you're going to start getting a little bit more depth in this, right? It's not going to flatten out quite as much. And then from there, I think you could start playing around with some interesting ideas about what's happening with the light, because it feels like in this city all the lights are on for some reason, and so maybe this light isn't, right? And so just playing around a little bit with that. The stars feel a little bit too perfect, like they're right there in the same point. right, like sort of like these are all kind of like this straight line. So I think you need to mix those up just a little bit, maybe make some a little bit smaller than others, a little bit bigger than others. And then the last thing I would kind of consider doing is just something about the way the light falls on this. So like let's say the light seems like it's coming from behind them. It could be something as simple as so I'm going to go back, select this one, Control C, Control F. So I just pasted that one in front of it. I'm going to make this a little bit lighter, not completely lighter, maybe just something like that. And then I'm going to erase almost all of it. Erase. My eraser tool really big. Oh, I was going the wrong way. There we go. So just erase large portions of it. Holding down the Shift button. Not caps lock, Shift. And so Shift will let us kind of draw in a straight line. Shift. Like, what about even doing something like that to it? Like, well, maybe not. Turning down the opacity quite a bit. So, like, I don't know. We're just kind of playing around with it to try to see if we get a little bit more volume in it. Maybe even the same with these windows. Like, the windows right now are a solid color. What if they just weren't? What if they were a gradient instead, and that gradient went from that yellow you have to just more like right there. And then angle that at. So even something like that. So we're just starting to get a little bit more detail into it. And I think it just needs, that's the biggest thing, is it just needs more details to kind of start bringing some of that information out. And so that was the biggest thing that I was noticing on that. Clear clipboard. Ryan. So let me do give it a second to pop up here. That's interesting. Wow. So you used a lot of filters on this one. Okay. And so you can start to see some of the stuff in there that's like the some of the things that's happening there is like you're getting a lot of this stuff out of those filters. It's just starting to get a little noisy. It's noisy and it's very like heavily patterned. Like I can see the I can see the pattern that repeats in this. Does it make sense? Like it just feels like a texture overlay. And so I think it needs more than anything is just something to kind of break that up and give it volume again. Because right now all of these areas here have a nice texture to them, but they don't really have a lot of volume, and they're very like flat texture. Right? So something you could consider doing is just go in here with a completely new layer. Take the Bob brush in here and just start. Oh goodness. Control Z. There we go. Let me set that back to black. So if you're just doing a little bit like that, select that, turn your transparency to something like darken 20, right? and just went in here with the bob brush and just kind of added some extra depth to this, right, to kind of keep some shadows and some roundedness in there, right? And so this is just kind of on top of it. We're just kind of adding those things in to darken it and bring some of that volume back that has kind of disappeared since we've created it, right? And so these are very blobby shapes that you'd probably want to work in there even better, right? That one kind of sucks. So once you get that in there, then what you can do is add a new layer, freeze that one, start it again, right, and get other blobby shapes in here that, and again, you'll probably want to vary up your brush size, maybe even use the one of the tablets so you get a little bit more texture in there. But so I think just by doing some of this, we can start to really get some of that detail back that we lost by having so many. So this is interesting that you got a chance to kind of play around with those things to get the previews. See, this is working really well now in this tree. That you get to play around with all those filters to see what you can get out of them. I just think it's kind of limited what you can get out of them. Like, I use them very sparingly. So add another one. I'm just going to continue adding more and more of these layers of this to kind of start getting volume. And of course, again, like, these are shapes that you would want to clean up a little better than what I have here. And so you'll see sort of the difference between the two. We start getting a little bit more volume back into it. So that's my biggest thing that I notice on it. And it's also a little just contrasty. Like, there's so much noise in all of this, whereas your sky and your lighthouse is so clean and nice. So like, I think this just got a little noisy to me. So I'd play around with that just a little bit more and see if you can get something more polished. Wrong folder. Teresa. Let's see how this one came out. So I don't have a lot on this one. The only thing I would say, like, this one just looks really good. The few little things that I would say is that line just feels really sharp there, and I think it's supposed to be part of the cityscape, so I just kind of clean that up a little bit. No, it's the opposite. I'd messy that up a little bit around those edges, and maybe even around some of these edges in this one here as well. Like, this one's coming out really good. This one got a little boxy. But otherwise, like, I'm not 100% sure what happens here. Is this gray and it connects into this red object? I think to tie that together a little bit more, and this is extremely nitpicky, is to have a little bit of, like, maybe like some red highlights or something in here to kind of show some bounce light from it. Like, I guess the thing is, all of this has so much color, and this is just completely gray without any color at all. And so it almost needs to be tinted a little bit in one of these directions to feel like it's really in there. If you're wanting it to look like sort of a darker overlay on it, you may try like just a darker hue of this yellow or this red or whatever, but like, it just doesn't have any of the color from the rest of the environment bouncing off of it. But having said that, that's very nitpicky. This one's really nice. Travis, let's look. Awesome. So I don't know which planet this is you want to be on, but we can see Earth and Saturn. So I think that this one's just neat. A little bit of weirdness going on with whatever this like highlight here is, and you get this really scraggly like edge around the edge there. I wonder what that's coming from. Maybe think I would even clean that up a little bit. I don't know. I like the scraggliness to it, but it just has like 3-color band thing going on, where the rest of this is really nicely broken up into the planes of light. Like, I don't know, this feels a little like a sharp jump, and then whatever is going on here feels like, why is that? I guess that's where the mist is kind of coming in from the ocean, and it just kind of has this hard line there. Those are my only real notes on that one. So I think it's a neat idea, and I think these cliffs worked really well. So okay, so overall, great work. This was exercise 2, the landscape. I'll come back and get exercise 3 and then the 2 projects in the next few videos. So hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.